Hey everyone, Zak and Jules here, and we're so excited to be back with you for season 2 of Life After Prison, The Sit Down.
But before we start, we really need your help. Life after prison is nothing without you guys.
All of you listening to us, wherever you are the most important part of life after prison, and we need to hear from you.
And we want to know exactly what you think of the show.
Life After Prison is funded by the National Lottery. And for us to be able to secure more funding, keep the project going, we need to be able to prove to the lottery that you, the Life After Prison community, are loving exactly what we do.
And that you want us to keep Life After Prison going forever.
Forever?
Forever, ever.
Forever, ever. So we've made a small feedback form. It's totally anonymous. We'll be so grateful if as many of you as possible could please complete the form.
It will take you about 3 minutes to complete, and it will help us out so much.
You can find the link to the form in the podcast description or our Instagram bio and on our website, lifeafterprisonpod.com.
Again, thank you so much and enjoy the episode.
Yeah.
Some tough subjects are discussed in this episode, and if you're affected by any of this, there are some organisations listed in our show notes who can help.
So, Jules, did you read any memorable book whilst you were inside?
I did actually, and I don't read books. I never complete them, but this one was called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven.
Good book.
Yeah, really good actually.
Okay, that's not bad.
Did you?
Yeah, a couple. One's called Noughts and Crosses. That's by Mallory Blackman, and Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Good books, man. Check them out.
Welcome back to Life After Prison, The Sit Down with Zak and Jules.
Yes, this is a podcast where we're joined by a special guest every week, and they share their journey of life after prison. And today with us, we have someone who served in the army, as well as time in prison, to speak about how his 15-year prison sentence affected his relationship with his children. He's also the author of Charlie 4 Kilo, It's the Lost Soldier, Rich Jones.
Hi there. Thank you for having me on.
How you doing?
Thanks for coming.
Good. No, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Good. It's good to have you
Pleasure
here.
to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Rich, we are here to talk about, you, but also the fact that you had children whilst you were in prison. So I first just wanted to ask you, what was it like to be a father serving time?
Difficult, because I think initially when you get involved in crime, for me, I was a single lad at the time in 95. And when you sort of embark on that journey into criminality, you don't necessarily have these responsibilities with you. So as you plow into it and get deeper and deeper, you meet someone, you get married and have children. And all that time, you don't really consider that how it's going to affect them when you go away. And for myself, I was always ready to go to prison if I continued doing what I was doing. I didn't consider how it would affect them until I got inside. And that's when the gravity of, I guess, of being a father comes into it, as you realise that how the damage is done to your children. And it slowly affects you over the remand period, during the trial period. You've got so much going on inside your head about what you're focusing on, trying not to get sent down for starters. So you kind of, for me, it was, because there was a trial, I thought, well, I could maybe just wing this and get away with it and not get sent down and everything will be fine. But when you get that guilty, you got the realisation you've now got to sort of deal with the fact you're going to be going away for an amount of time. You're unaware at that moment. And then you think that's when the damage hits your kids.
How did it affect the kids then?
Badly. It took time. My kids were just turned 7 and 13 when I went away.
So quite young.
Young enough for it to have an effect on their state of mind. My youngest, his mental health was severe. This didn't come to light until I was on the Rottler process, which was back in 2019 or 2018, 2019.
How many years in was?
I did 7.5 years, and out of the 15, so I'm still unlicensed now till 2027. And the damage was done more so to my youngest, because at that age, a child's perception is the parent is either there or not there. There's no, he's coming back next week. They can't see that far ahead. They only see, well, he's not here. So it would be like a bereavement for your kids. That's how it would feel. And I think that's how the effect on certainly my youngest, because he's a lot more open with his emotions. His mental health declined quite seriously at the point where he wanted to take his own life.
Wow.
Fortunately, because I spent a lot of time inside with the listeners and Samaritans, I luckily identified on areas of mental health and things like self-harm, and I noticed there were some indications that he wasn't in a good place, and we got involved with CAMS, which is the initial process, and that was during the COVID lockdown in 2020. And I was dealing with my own demons at the time, having just come out of prison, so we engaged with CAMS, and they gave us a support worker.
CAMS,
it's a local. I can't think what it stands for. It's a local charity for
children, adolescent mental health, something like that.
It could well be, yeah.
Mental health services or something like that.
Yeah. But they're good, but they're so overstretched. There's so many people they're trying to deal with, and we engaged with CAMS. You had a brilliant caseworker called Ollie, given 6 sessions. But during this time, I was dealing with my own mental health with a chap I know through the military for PTSD. And I mentioned to him about the trauma that my youngest had suffered with me going away, and he said he can help with that. So fortunately, we booked him in for a session of EMDR therapy, and within 2 sessions, he was literally, a different person.
How's he doing now?
That's great.
Really well now. He's 90% close to getting accepted to university for film studies and media. So he's almost there. He's a lot better, better.
Good.
He's in a good place. A much better place.
So you got the help when you were released from prison for your son.
Yeah.
When you went in, how did it affect you?
Initially, not that bad initially, because when you're waiting for, I think, whilst on remand, it was okay. Once you get sentenced and you get hit with that 15, although in your mind you know you're going to be doing a certain amount in a Cat B, then a C, then a D, and rottle and everything else, it's trying to explain that to them that they're going to be gone for 7.5 years. So I think the breakdown for me was the day of sentencing. You literally get told 15 years, and you do say that a lot in your mind, and you guys know whatever the sentence is, it's relevant to yourself. And you're trying to break it down. And I got back to my cell on remand, and I sort of had the pictures of my kids on the wall and looked at them. I thought, at the time, there was a picture of my youngest, and he was, I think, about 4 or 5 then, and my oldest was of a similar age. And I thought, I'm going to see you again when you're going to be 13 and you're going to be a young man.
It's horrible when you do it like that, isn't it?
I know. And I thought, I'm not going to see you in an environment which isn't prison-like for 7 years. And it killed me. It destroyed me. I spent a good 10, 15 minutes having a good old cry. And then I just did what we do, is suck it up, think about it, right, okay, just forget about it. And I boxed it off. The emotions, I just compartmentalized everything about the kids, my wife, everything I loved and cared about. I just thought, I can't allow myself to be thinking about you, because I wouldn't be able to do this if I continue. So I boxed it all off, which was great for me during my sentence, because I didn't have to have the emotional connection to anyone. I didn't feel anything. It's not ideal, but it's how I dealt with it. It's how I coped with it. Visits were just, for me, something that had to just be false. I had to pretend I was enjoying visits when I didn't. I was just there in the room, eating whatever was being put in front of me, wishing it was over.
Why did you wish it was over?
I wasn't comfortable because I didn't feel anything for my kids.
Do you think they needed that? Did they benefit from the visits and coming to see you?
Yeah, I think so. I think the kids would have benefited from seeing their dad. I knew that the visit was for them, not for me. For me, a visit was always just this barrier of my flow of time. It just seemed to get in the way, but it didn't help, because they're not stupid. They pick up on the fact that dad's not emotionally in the room, but I never really was. While I was doing what I was doing, involved in crime, I wasn't really ever emotionally there. I was a good dad on paper, but the reality was I struggled with so many of my own demons, and getting out of prison, I think, was quite difficult because I boxed off all these emotions. The Rottle process allowed me to get used to the environment of being out of prison, but it didn't give me time to sort of really click and engage emotionally. That takes a lot longer. It took a good year for me to really get back in with me kids and start to sort of really galvanize that father-son relationship, which I'd missed. Or to be fair, I'd never really had. It was never there because I was never really in the room emotionally the way that I could have been, because the stress of being involved in crime meant I had to at all times protect them, and living in a house where it could go wrong at any minute. The door could come through from either the police or other people involved in crime. So I've always had this sort of detached emotionally from my family just to protect them. So I think now is the first time ever I've actually feeling like I'm a dad again. I feel the emotions, I feel the connection. So yeah, it's nice now. It's good.
I know you're talking about how it is now, but when you first got out, what was the relationship like between you and your children?
It was just initially it felt as false as on a visit. Although I was there, because as well as the bond with my kids, it was trying to rekindle a bond with my wife, who'd been an exceptional mum all the time through. And we realised that we'd been together at that point nearly 20 years, and we felt that it wasn't working for us anymore. So we decided to split in February 2020, which again, that's another devastating blow for our kids. So not only is he dealing with his mental health with me having been away, we've then got to sit there and tell him, well, by the way, mum and dad are going to split. So that really knocked him back quite a long way, and that is what aggravated his mental health to the point where he was close. So fortunately, again, we picked up the ball and we focused on him, made sure he was okay. My ex and I are best of friends anyway, so there's no real. We're great parents, just a rubbish husband and wife. It just didn't work out. So we focused on being parents rather than husband and wife, and we focused on our kids, and they're okay. But it was hard. It was very bumpy, really bumpy road.
You said it took a year after. So this is when you've been released from prison. It took about a year to build up.
Yeah.
What? How is it now? What's it like now?
No, it's good. It's good. I've since May 2020, I've had my own place. He stays with me every other weekend, and more often than that, if I can. We spend a lot of time walking, just out with the simplicity of life. When you've been away, you know what it's like. The material things don't matter as much initially. It's the simple things which I value the most. And myself and my youngest will spend a lot of time out walking, just bonding, rebonding, catching up.
You said before you went in, you said you weren't really there. I was going to ask you, what was your relationship like before prison? Is it closer now?
Yeah, it feels closer now. I feel now emotionally, I'm much stronger emotionally. My mental health is intact, whereas before there's so much stress.
Yeah,
a stress of either being in debt, or the stress of waiting to get caught, or the stress of something waiting to come crashing down around you. So you've always got this underlying stress, and it taints everything you do, everything, even though, and that's why people involved in drugs spend money crazily, because they're trying to mask the fact they're having a really rubbish life. They're trying to enjoy the moment, because that moment is going to come crashing down any minute. And I think if you live in life day by day, and it literally is day by day, how can you really engage properly with anyone? You can't plan further ahead than a few days.
So if you don't mind, can we talk a little bit more about that? So
yeah, sure.
You said you brought up drugs, and this is all before prison. Was it a lead up to you going to prison?
Yeah, way before. When I left the forces in '95, my plan was to go into close protection and bodyguard work, which I did.
I can see you doing that.
Yeah.
And how long were you in the army for?
7.5 years.
7.5 years, so and then you got out, and then this was your plan.
Trained by special forces into BG, where it's surveillance, and at the time the things like the security industry wasn't regulated by the SIA, so it was a lot of people from, we'll call it the underworld if you like, were involved. So you were introduced to things which you weren't expecting, or I wasn't ready for that. I was very naive. And in the forces, you think you've got a handle on life, but we haven't got a clue. We think we've got a handle on life, but we can operate in certain areas very well, but put us in a normal environment, we're not ready for that. And I guess I was exploited to a degree, or allowed myself to be exploited into the criminal circles, where I got involved in distribution of drugs and eventually cocaine. And then it was all a downfall, but the stress involved with that life. Initially, it was because I could handle it with the adrenaline. It seemed to feel like it was a good thing to do. But the adrenaline soon fades away, and it's just a sense of relief that you're not getting caught, and then you're living day by day, always looking for an exit, but never finding one. So
is that what kind of built that basis of that feeling of constantly being stressed. When you say stressed, do you mean like, what do you mean by stressed?
I think when you go in the forces, it's drilled into you to be constantly vigilant. There's always a threat. And we're always looking for the threat, even if it's not there. And hypervigilance really kicks in. And when that's running like software in the back of your mind all the time, we've spoken about this before.
Yeah, we have.
I'm glad we're facing the exits now. It's kind of this, you can't help it. And that just adds to the stress of life. And when you think there's a threat there all the time, you're constantly half-readied when you don't need to be. So it builds up. And then when you get involved in organised crime, that amplifies that massively because the threat is very, very real, whether it be from rivals or whether it be from the fact the police are going to come through the door. And there's nothing wrong with the police doing their job. We've got no malice against the police whatsoever, but it is still a concern, especially when your wife and children don't know what you're doing. So the stress of having a double life does take its toll.
Do you feel like there's a similarity of being released from prison and from when you got out of the army? Are they completely different?
There are a lot of similarities. Being inside prison and in the forces are very similar. We're used to being inside of an enclosed environment. We're used to barbed wire on fences. We're used to being things regimed and structured. And coming out is similar. But what I found is that prison life actually can equip you with the tools to be a part of the community if you're in the right prison and if you engage in the way that you can do. Whereas the forces.
And did you get any help when you got out
of the forces?
Out of the forces, yes.
Minimal. No, they'll give you this was back in '95. They give you a budget of what you can afford for a settlement course. You go through an old folder. No computer. Well, there were computers, but not many. You scroll through. Think, I like looking. I'll be a bodyguard. That'll do me. Off you go. There's money.
It must be
luck.
So hard.
That's it.
Like,
yeah.
Just because of we're feeling the effects of being released from prison. I don't know, just trying to even translate that from getting out of the army must have been so hard. Did you struggle with anything when you got out of prison? Or did you, and also did you prepare, like, because from being released, from getting out of the army, knowing that you might have struggles getting out of prison, did you have any?
Luckily, I think the difference with prison was I'm a little bit older now, so I got out to a fairly stable lifestyle. And I've already done this getting out of something before. I've got out of the army and I messed that right up. So the getting out of prison, right, I've learned from my mistakes. So I actually engaged 100% right through my sentence. I built my business while I was in prison to be launched when I came out of prison. So I wanted to hit the ground running. So I was lucky. I was in a decent jail, which provided all the stuff I required. They empowered me to run my own course and veteran support. So I was fortunate to be where I was and to have the ideas that I had. So for me, it was a similar process, but I treated it completely differently. I engaged with it rather than thinking I was going to go out and go clubbing. This time I'm thinking, nope, I'm going to go out to my wife and kids and I'm going to be well-behaved and sort my life out.
How many years were in between you leaving the army and leaving prison?
Pretty much 15 years between. I left in 95, I was convicted in 2012. So it was 15, 17 years? It's quite a long time.
That is quite a long time.
That is quite a long time.
It's a very long time.
And in that time, obviously you've got into what you've got into. And you're talking about adapting. Did you feel like you even adapted, like coming out of the army?
Yeah, you think you adapt. When you leave the forces, if you go in at a young age, and most of us do, I went at 18, and when you're quite young, your sort of prefrontal cortex is developing until about 25. So most of the things you learn, cognitive function especially, become hardwired into who you are. So when you leave the forces, something is structured and regimented as the army. When you come out of that, you can't not be that soldier. You're always going to be that soldier. You're always going to think, eat, sleep, walk, act and behave in a certain way. That's never going to go. And all of the things, all of the various skills and the stuff that you learn in there, that's become second nature or first nature even. So when you go out into what we call Civvy Street, we apply that in the best way that we can. And the way that we describe it is a veteran is like a hexagonal peg. We don't quite fit into a square hole. We don't quite fit into a round hole, but we will try our best, but we're never going to really quite fit. And that's how you feel. You feel like you're part of the community, but you're not, because of all these other things you've done. And we've got this ridiculous mentality about, but we've gone and done so much at such a young age. And there's that classic is, oh, you weren't there, man. How would you know? It's our downfall of thinking that we're better than anyone else. But reality is we're not. We're just these individual soldiers. And that's where the lost soldier comes from, was we just get lost in society. We lose our track of life.
And you didn't get any help when you were when you got out of the army?
No, one of the biggest downfalls for anyone in the forces is the part of you that should ask for help gets trained out of you, because we're taught to overcome, to adapt, to improvise, and all these things to say, look, you could be anywhere in the world, you need to learn to survive. And you get told, you can do this, you can do this. So when you come out of the forces, we think we can do this, and we're slowly slipping. You think, no, I've got this, and you slip a little bit further, and then by the time you think you should ask for help, you've slipped so far that you don't want to ask help because you're embarrassed that you've failed, and you become a failure, and you haven't managed to crack this thing called Civvy Street. And I'm not saying every veteran, it's a minority, but we all struggle in our own ways. Some of us struggle a lot.
So how did you feel, and how did you deal with going to prison? How did you spend your time?
Really productively. I think for me, getting caught was one of the best things that happened to me since starting my time in crime. It was the final, like, it's over. At last, it's finished now, and I can get off this crazy ride and start something new. And going to prison for me was, I think it was necessary, because my transition was that poor out of the forces. It was that messed up. I had no direction. And I think prison gave me the chance to focus on me, for me to be the best version of myself. And then I discovered the fact there was a veteran community in the prisons. And I looked at the journey of the guys that I was serving time with, who'd been in the forces, and I realised that we've all suffered similar problems with our transition. So when I was in my Cat C in Oakwood, I looked into the intervention side of things and discussed with the lead on that. So are there any interventions designed for veterans, or more specifically around our transition, and how that can be associated with our offender behaviour? And they got back and said, we haven't got anything that we're aware of. No. I said, well, can I write my own programme and introduce that? And they just looked at me and said, yeah, go on then, just crack on, as if to say,
whatever kind of thing.
3 months later on, I turned up with a big old folder with a 12 module course. Right, there you go. Check it out. And that was it. I was delivering it within 2 months to the veterans in custody, and then I was given it as a pilot scheme in 2017, delivered it during 2018 with the intention of going back into the prisons to deliver it as a third-party funded provider for 2020.
Wow.
So talking about going back into prisons, what's that like, going back in there as a free man? Like,
it has its moments. I go into a few prisons now, but the main ones I work with is HMP Oakwood and Five Wells. I was housed in Oakwood for 5 years. I was in the same cell for 5 years.
It's a long time.
Yeah, so going into Oakwood feels like I'll never call it home, but it's walking into a very familiar surrounding, and I'm back on the route thinking, I've never left. Because I'm not keen. I got to stand at gates and wait for someone to open the gate for me. So it's like, oh, really? So, but going into Five Wells, it's like going into work. Five Wells is brand new, state of the art. The guys have got tablets. There's internal Wi-Fi system so they can use the tablets. So Five Wells is really good. The way that it works, and now I've got almost carte blanche to do whatever I like for veteran support in there. So I'm also known as a VIXO officer. I'm a Veterans in Custody Support Officer, as well as program delivery with interventions for my course. So Five Wells is great. It feels like work, and it's nice to walk out. It's nice to have your fingerprint to go through the staff entrance rather than the biometrics to get your canteen or anything else. And you're treated so well, because people are now beginning to understand that this lived experience thing that we've all got holds a value. And that's the value of what it is going in there. It's rewarding knowing that I'm going in, making a difference, making a change, and it makes me feel good as well that I'm doing the right thing for a change.
And do you have keys?
Not yet. Close.
How do you think you're going to feel when you actually have keys?
I'll be nervous, really nervous, because I know I have to say no to a lot of people about letting through gates because there are restrictions. I'll be nervous. I'll be shaking, trying to get my hand into the key. I just, part of me doesn't want keys.
Yeah.
I quite like thumbing a lift around the prison to get through the gates like I did when I was a prisoner, but to have keys would be breaking down a barrier.
So just to take it back a little bit, when you were inside prison, did you meet any other veterans in there? And how did you fight? Yeah, how did the first before you got into what you were doing inside? How did that go for you? What was it like?
It's good. You tend to click immediately, and you can generally spot the veterans in there. Either they'll wear something which will
really
give it away, like a wristband, or there'll be a tattoo. Or
is it one of those things that if you know kind of thing?
Yeah, you look at how they walk and how they conduct themselves, and they'll be just looking at you thinking, you look at them thinking, and you think, you served? And I say, yeah. And I say, what's your number? And I straight away say, what's your number? Because if you can't come out of a service number, then
you're a bit.
Was there a lot of veterans in there?
Quite a few, yeah. I mean, every prison will have a veteran community in there. In Oka, we had about 80. Whoa. In Five Oars, we got at the minute about 20, 21, 22. But that's climbing. It's climbing all the time. So there is a community there, and there's a lot which need help, a lot of complex issues, no more than anyone else. But we're very fortunate in the veteran community that we've got additional support. We've got literally hundreds of charities out there, maybe more than 1,000 for veterans. And they're there for a reason, because we struggle. So we've got all this additional support when we come into prison and when we come out as well.
So now providing support to veterans in prison, are a lot of them fathers as well?
Yes, yeah, a fair few, fair few.
So, like, what advice do you give parents in a similar situation to yourself then?
I think if I've taken from my own personal journey, is don't detach your emotions the way that I did, because that in itself can be quite damaging to your kids. They need to know that their dad or their mum feels for them. They need to know that. They need to feel that positive glow. Going through the emotions isn't enough, and I think it's worth a little bit of heartache inside to know that you're not going to go through the sort of the difficulties when you come out. So try and remain attached emotionally. Do
you think they noticed that you weren't attached?
I think they did, yeah. I think they do after time. After time, I think it has to be noticed. They'll pick up. Kids need to be loved, and I think they'll pick up if one of their parents isn't feeling that love or isn't showing that love. I think they'll know that, they'll feel it. And it's hard enough in the visits hall anyway, isn't it?
So then if you, because you said that you had to shut off, you had to compartmentalize. I can't say that word.
That's a hard word.
Yeah. But that word, yeah. You had to do that in order box off. You had to box off those kind of emotions and feelings to do your time. But you're saying now that you wouldn't have done it that way now, or that's the advice you give, yeah?
In hindsight, I wouldn't do it, no. I mean, people on short sentences won't need to.
Okay.
Because you haven't got that thing of like, I've got to go all these years. People in long sentences need to allow themselves to feel, even if it's a case of going through some sort of, I don't know, I won't say meditation, but some way to re-engage their emotions with their family prior to a visit. There needs to be a lot done about that for long-termers, especially if you've got kids, to allow them to build their emotions with their kids. Because
and how would you have done that then?
I think need to be able to start having, you get the rottle process, which is good, which helps. There needs to be given more awareness about difficulties of how it's going to work. I think a lot more people to sort of stand up and say, look, this is what I struggle with. These were my difficulties because this is how I managed it. It was great for me. I managed just fine, but kids not so good. So they need to be aware that boxing it off isn't going to help. Not in the long run. It's quite damaging in the end for everyone involved.
So, Rich, you say your relationship with your kids now is great. It's good, and I absolutely love to hear that. What was the journey like to getting to where you are now, and how did you build that up? How long did it take?
So I've been out of prison now 3.5 years, and I would say the first 6 months were messy because I'm just finding my feet, and all the rottles in the world don't really prepare you for that day that you walk out of prison in there. I think what helped me was once my now ex-wife and I decided to separate, I could then build my own life slightly and structure my own life. And coming out of prison, I'm coming out of not just 7.5 years in prison. I'm coming out of 7.5 years in prison, 15 years in organised crime, 7.5 years in the army. I'm coming out of 30 years of living in a particular way. So a lot of adjustment needs to be made.
Mm.
And that's what I found quite enjoyable, because I didn't have the stress of the crime behind me anymore. I detached from everything. I don't have a social life that I'm aware of, so that helped me to focus on work and the family. And I found the whole experience really enjoyable, because although it was difficult and there was a lot of work, really a lot of hard work to do from my end to make the kids realize that I'm not going to disappear again. I am going to be there for good. And I found every single minute of it just an absolute pleasure, because I think spending time with my son, I say son, I focused on my youngest. I've got an older son as well, so I'll talk about him in a sec. Spending those moments with my youngest son, just building that sort of bond without the concern of everything going on around me, it was just so valuable. And I purposely took him for a walk in a place called Blaze Castle in Bristol. It's a big estate, rivers, forests, cliffs, everything that you love to do with family. We used to go there while I was on trial when he was sort of 6 years old, nearly 7 years old. I'd walk around thinking, I wonder if I'm going to get to do this again.
Wow.
And then like 8 years later, I'm taking that same walk and he's a lot bigger. I'm a little bit older, but it's a whole different experience. I'm seeing things differently. I'm seeing the world.
New perspective.
Yeah. And do you know what it is? When you're involved, they say that when you're involved in crime and it's your way of life, they call it the underworld for a reason, because you're there, you're not seeing the world around you. You're just focused on, you fixate on what you're doing.
It's almost like a bubble, right?
Yeah, you're doing what you're doing, and that's your only focus. You don't care about what's around you apart from the risk of the police and anything else. That's all you're looking out for. You're not noticing the wood between the trees and that sort of thing. But when you're not doing that anymore, you see everything, and you sense everything differently.
When you looked at the picture of your kids in prison, did you ever think that you could get to this position and it would feel like this?
At that time, no. For me, it felt like it's going to be forever. I knew it would arrive in time, but I didn't know how positive it would feel.
Oh.
I thought it would be just pick up where I left off, but it wasn't. I didn't have no idea, because I lived my life that way for so long. I didn't know any other way. I didn't know how to feel any different way. And then when I come out, I thought, once I got over the initial, I'm out of prison, okay, let's get things set up. And I thought, this is nice. I like this. I'm not stressed. Or once I dealt with my demons and had my PTSD removed, I was a different person, and everything just changed. And
your relationship with your older son?
It's good. He's 22 now. Or is he 20? He's 22. Yeah, he's 22. So it's good. I mean, he was at the age when I came out, he was turning 18, 19. So he's got a girlfriend, he's living with his girlfriend, he's done really well. And I think he's got the emotions of a stone. And then that's my fault, because when I went to Wales, it was the last day before the jury had been deliberated and finally come up with the verdict. And I had a feeling it was going to be the day I was not going to come back. And I did the classic thing of going downstairs, whacked the computer and left a video message for him. And I said, left a message for my oldest son, said, if you're reading this, I'm not going to be here. And that was tough. I did the worst thing of saying, son, you're the man of the house now.
Just the pressure, man.
Yeah, so much pressure on it. And I know that they would have seen that. And he took it on board, and he did. He did good, but I think he still carries that pressure. So I need time to sit down with him, bond with him. We've not done it yet. We've not done it. I focused on the youngest because he was what I would class as critical. I needed to make sure he was okay. The oldest is fine. He's perfectly well, but emotionally, he's not.
So it's going to take a little bit more time to build to where maybe you want it to be.
Yeah, we don't have that. I want to say there's definitely love there. That's without a doubt. But I don't have that connection. It's not there yet.
How did you build that connection with the younger one?
Time. Just time. All it takes. And understanding. Giving him the open space to be honest about his feelings. To give him that safe place to say, Dad, I'm not liking this. Dad, this is the difficulties we faced. But he does look up to me now. He's got that kind of, we've got that bond where he can say, look, Dad, I'm having a bad time right now, which is nice because I know that he's turning to me as well as his mum. And that's a really valuable thing because I never thought that would ever happen, but it is.
So you spent time when you're inside prison. You worked on veterans and helping veterans.
Yeah.
Was there anything else inside that got you through your time? What?
Fitness.
Fitness.
Most of us, for some reason, it's going to be some degree of fitness. I kept occupied. I had a job, full-time job, I was working in the block for 10 months. I was a coordinator. I was always some sort of red-banded job, trusted. And every time you get a trusted job, you always abuse that trust, don't you, in some way? Stealing chicken from the kitchens, whatever it is we're doing. That's what I was done for anyway. So keeping busy, working really hard and focus on fitness and really trying to get me to be the best version of me. And I tried to get that nailed. And I think that's what got me through was the fitness, planning the business. I wanted to go out and be stable, to have some kind of idea of a career. And although I wasn't going to be the youngest version of myself, I wanted to be the best version. So I needed to focus and have a business, a career, something that was going to earn good money when it worked, to be healthy, rarely drinking, no more drugs. I'd never smoked. So I wanted to be that person that I should have been.
Was that from the get-go as soon as you went inside?
Yeah, day one.
You stayed focused. Yeah, really well done.
7.5 years. I didn't the only days went by without training was if I was really ill. And even then my head would fall off after a day. I need to do something, a pad workout, something. But it gets most of us through, doesn't it? Exercise is one thing. It's good for your endorphins and everything else. So it got me through.
And then in the run up to getting released, how did you prepare for that?
I was lucky with the full role. I did nearly 2.5 years of day release. So
from a DCAT?
No, from a Cat C. I was the first one from Oakwood to do the whole 2 years of day release. I stayed in a closed prison because I needed to focus on the business side of it as well. I was continuing to deliver my course in there as well. So I'd spend 1 day a week in the prison delivering the course. Then I'd go out every other day. So I was going home on every other weekend, 4-day overnighters, the whole thing you would get in your Cat D. And that really got me ready for going home. But as I said, it doesn't really fully prepare you. It prepares you as much as it can. But there's always going to be a few gaps which you need to fill in yourself when you get home. And
then when you did get out, and then when you did get out, was there anything that you struggled with? Anything that was kind of difficult for you?
Yeah, I think as I sort of alluded to earlier, was with the emotional connection is what I found difficult, because even though when I was on day release, even if it was a 5-dayer, I wasn't connecting. I still knew that I had to go back on that train back to Wolverhampton. So that was difficult. Was the coming home was nice, but I was coming home to the house which I walked out of on trial every day. And that was for me a reminder of my old life. It was the last place I lived before I went away. Although living in that house, I was never up to anything because I moved there knowing it was a smaller house, knowing that I probably wouldn't be there for long. So that house reminded me of my old life. And I think there's too many reminders there. So getting released to the house that I was sent down from was kind of like made it difficult. So moving house made a big difference. And unfortunately separating make a big difference as well. But it just need more time. Just need time to allow yourself to sort of, I guess, process the world around you and everything around you. And if you are genuinely coming out of prison and you've decided to move on from the old life, then it's a no-brainer. It's an easy move. If you've got doubts, then it makes it more difficult. If you don't have doubts, it's easy because everything just happens for you, or it should.
And did you get any help when you were released from prison?
Yeah, so there's an organisation, a military organisation called SAFA, which means Soldiers, Sailors, Airmen and Families Association. It's actually one of the oldest charities in the UK, older than the British Legion, and they do a prison in-reach service across the UK. And they were instrumental right through my sentence of support. They'll step in and they'll literally, if the washing machine blows up, new washing machine, new bed, laptop, everything, you name it, SAFA has stepped in and done it. So yeah, they've changed a lot for me.
We might get you to repeat the organisation maybe at the end, but just before we do, so just going back talking about your business, and can you tell us a little bit more about it and what else you're doing at the moment? So you're still doing this business now?
Yeah, so I was a resettlement coordinator in 2015, and I'd always had this idea that if I was going to get sent down, I was going to do a book. And that sort of stayed in the back of my mind. And I thought, well, okay. And then this option came up to deliver this, or to write this course for veterans. So I called it Project TLS. And the TLS thing was kind of like, no one knew what the TLS meant, because no one knew I was going to write a book about this lost soldier. So the TLS is kind of like a part of this branding I was doing, but it means a lost service personnel to encompass everyone in the forces. So the course is like 12 modules, and it focuses on things like mentality, risk-taking behavior, mental health, debt and money management, working with charities. Every area that I struggled with in my life when I came out of the forces, I thought, I'm sure if I just sit there and ask myself a load of questions in these different areas, I can come up with some way to sort of create some sort of dynamic between a group of veterans to discuss our journey, and then figure out where do we go wrong and where can we go right. And that's what the course is in a nutshell. It's basically a dynamic between a group of people who have shared experience, bounce off each other for 6 days and see what we can do with it.
This is the business?
That's the business, yeah, which is delivered now in 2 prisons. Okay,
amazing. That is incredible.
Yeah.
And sounds like it's very much needed as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So Charlie 4 Kilo.
Yeah, tell us about this.
Well, some people wonder, where's the name Charlie 4 Kilo come from? And it's a spin on 2 things. One, the phonetic alphabet is very military, and 4 kilos of Charlie is symbolic as part of my life, and it's the first book released in a series of 4 books.
Okay, it's a series, yeah?
Yeah, there's too much over a 30-year time span.
Wow, did you know it was going to be too much? Or
I was going to do three books initially, and my publisher said, you've got to do 4 because this is going to be too long for your first book. So it focuses on my take as someone who's from the forces, being involved in organised crime, and how my life, because I've learned to trust people in a certain way because of the military connection I've had, and being very organised. It's like being in organised crime with disorganised people, and how their mistakes can have catastrophic effects to your life. And that's what happens in this book. It's based on true events. I can't make it a true account because that would be wrong. So it's based on a true story, and it's about not only it doesn't really focus just on organised crime, focus on my decline in mental health as well, where I become the point where I just don't want to live anymore. It gets quite dark at stage, but it has to be real. It has to hit a nerve for people who've been in the forces or get involved in organised crime. They realise that it's not all glamour, it's not all glory. This can take you to a very, very dark place. You could end up sat in a car park, literally think, right, I've had enough, I'm going to end it right now. And the funny thing is the thing that kept me alive was the thought of my kids. I was literally seconds away from like getting the game over, and I thought, no, can't do it. And that was like the sort of spur that I needed to push me forward. So yeah, but it's a great read. I'm not selling it much, am I?
It does.
It sounds like it's gonna be a great read. And as I said before, so needed. There's a lot of people, I'm sure, have been in similar situations or have felt how you felt, and I just think it's incredible. And thank you for sharing it. And
you're welcome.
It's important for people to hear it.
Yeah,
I feel like you kind of touched on this already, but I just wanted to ask you, what was the most important thing that's got you through everything you've been through?
Thought of my kids. Yeah, always. I think if ever I get a place where I think it's too much, or can't do it, or I'm not going to make it, I think, no, I got to now, because I got 2 people that depend on me, one way or the other. And they do now, weirdly enough, look up to me. And it's nice to know that they're sort of proud of their dad. Whereas before they didn't really know who their dad was because I was quite secretive. Now it's all out there. There's no secrets. I'm very, very open about my background and what I've done. And what I'm trying to do with that is that they look up to me now, which is nice. And that drives you even more. It pushes you, because then I know I can't let them down now, because they actually look up to me for a change. So I can't let them down. So yeah, the thought of those 2 boys just pushes me so hard.
That is really lovely to hear.
Yeah.
I actually also wanted to ask you what kind of support do you think, what other kind of support do you think veterans in prison need, or even getting out of the army or even getting out of prison?
I think that as a direct message to veterans, I think they need to just realise that asking for help isn't a sign of failure. And that's what most veterans will struggle to do, is actually asking for help. And another thing that most veterans will think is that there's someone else more deserving than they are. If I ask for help from this particular charity, I'm going to be shortchanging another veteran who may need it more than I do. They're all entitled to just as much. They all deserve the support. And it's a case of the prison staff identifying the veterans, which they do. There's continuity beginning to develop in the prisons about support services, and there's some great charities out there going in to help the veterans. But veterans can be a great asset on the wing. They can set standards if they want to. There are veterans wings in certain prisons, and they do work really well. So we're bringing them out of the woodwork. We're dealing with complex PTSD, combat-related PTSD. Prison isn't always the easiest environment for lots of loud bangs and alarms and stuff like that going off, so people can be triggered. So it's identifying them and just getting them to sort of declare they served, because the minute they declare they served, the help is on hand. If they don't declare, we can't help them.
Thank you.
Yeah, great advice. As we do on the sit down, we always ask our guests to signpost any organisations that supported them, and obviously you've touched on SAFA. Is there anything else you want to mention, that's any other organisations that supported you?
Yeah, SAFA, I would say SAFA is the primary one, but there are a lot of inReach organisations, and Project Nova is a really good charity, and they support people from in. They give you caseworkers on the out. You've got Care After Combat. There's a number of charities which don't always come into the prison, but they will engage with you when you come out of prison, which is the majority of them.
Yeah.
And it's just a case of understanding that they are out there, and if a veteran doesn't know where to look, they can track me down or go to the Veterans Gateway, which is another system. It's just like a portal, so they can go to the gateway and they'll be signposted from there. So there's so much help out there.
And how do people track you down, Rich?
Websites, Project TLS, or I am Rich James, or just look me up on social media.
I appreciate that. Thanks for that.
No worries.
There are other organisations that support people in prison and their families, such as Family Action, who support families and communities by building skills. And there's also PACT, which supports prisoners and people with convictions and their children and their families. So check them out if you need any additional support. Also, as Rich mentioned, sometimes there can be some difficulties when you get out. So check out our other podcast called Getting Out. Specifically, if you're looking to change location, move around, we've got an episode on accommodation where we sat down with Heidi Trott from Shelter, and she gives great advice on your housing needs. So check that out if you do need support.
We also really like to read your messages to us. So this is a really nice one from someone who's about to become a prison officer at a young offender institute and need a little bit of help and advice. They've said, I would like to ask you guys, having experienced prison and in particular a young offender institute, do you have any advice for me that might help me engage with young people better? Please. Thanks
for reaching out and asking for that advice. That's one thing I'd say first and foremost.
It's a good question. Yeah. And when it's, when done right in the best way, it can go a long way. I say listen and with and have no judgment and give the young offender just time to be themselves and
I second that. And I would also add to that as well, be patient, because in a while you've got a lot of emotions and people that maybe don't know how to, express them in the best way. So have a bit of patience and build a rapport with the people in there, and I'm sure you'll make a difference. Yeah, somehow. But thanks for reaching out.
Yes, and we really want to hear from you guys as well. So please do get in touch. You can do that by DMing us on Instagram or Twitter at AfterPrisonPod. Or you can email us at podcast@prison.radio. Or you can write to us at Life After Prison, National Prison Radio, HMP Brixton, London, SW2 5XF. We also have a website, which is lifeafterprisonpod.com. So you can visit that as well. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe as well.
All of that good stuff.
It's really helping a lot of people find the podcast, and, you know, we're having more and more amazing responses. So thank you.
So thanks to Rich. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
A massive thank you.
No, cheers.
Thank you for you guys listening and watching, and we'll see you next time.